Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Wells. I write horror, fantasy, and science fiction, and I talk about games on the internet. Today we're going to go back to the Iron Kingdoms RPG. I talked about the core book for this a few months ago. I genuinely don't know how long ago because time has become a meaningless blur. But anyway, today we're going to talk about the first source book for that RPG. And by source book, I mean gargantuan tome. This is actually thicker than the core book, but not by much. This is called Kings, Nations, and Gods, and it is an incredibly in-depth look at the 5 human nations that make up the Iron Kingdoms. And so, human, I don't have a PDF for this, so we're just looking at the physical book today, like cavemen. Here's the map. Da-da-da-da. Um, so you can see there's down the green one at the bottom is Crix, and then there's a blue one in the middle called Signar. Off to the bottom is called the Protectorate. In the middle there's an orange one called Ord. On the very top there's a red one called Kador, and then over on the side there's a purpley one called Lael. Now, the first one I mentioned, Crix, is one of the 3 inhuman kingdoms that we don't get to listen to or talk about. In the very top in the mountains you see Rule, that's the dwarf kingdom. And then below that in green is Ios, which is the elf kingdom. And then down at the bottom, those green islands are Crix, and that is like the undead kingdom. This book doesn't go into those, and that's sad for me because I'm primarily an Ios player. The Iosans, they're my favorite nation. They're the ones that I collect the minis of, and so sad for me. I don't get to talk about them today. But I also collect a lot of Kadors, so we're going to hear a lot about that. So anyway, those are those 5 human kingdoms. And what we get is just a gargantuan amount of data for each of them. Okay? I'm going to show you something. Here's Signar. Signar. And here it is. This is the portion of the book that talks about Signar. That is all by itself as thick as any other source book. So this is an entire nation source book, but you get 5 of them, and they're all bound together in one volume. What each of them has is a lot of, first of all, world information. What is the history of Signar? Where do they come from? What are they like? They get close-ups of that map that I showed you. So I just showed you the whole Iron Kingdoms map. Then there is a close-up map of Signar. And what's nice is this little thing at the top is the Thornwood Forest. It isn't really part of any nation, and so every close-up map includes it on there. So you can see kind of where it sits in relation to everything else. It's kind of the center apple core of the Iron Kingdoms that isn't really a part of anything, but relates to everybody. So each book is going to go through and show you, just pages and pages of world information. What is the history of Signar? Who runs Signar? How is their politics set up? Who's in charge? Who are these specific individuals in charge? What are their religions like? What is their culture like? What do they value as a people? There are these massive military organization charts for almost all of the nations. I don't think Lael gets one because Lael's kind of a different thing. It's got really cool art of what their soldiers look like. It's got, descriptions of what their rank icons look like. What is their society? How do warjacks work in there? And it just goes on and on. There's so much of this. And then it gets into individual duchies or baronies or cities, all of the little things that make up the place. And you get more information than you thought you needed. More information than you thought was possible, perhaps, about each one of these things. Then it goes through organizations. Is there a school of wizardry? Is there a very important mechanical university? Is there a very important church or religion? Is there a very famous pirate group? So you get all of that. Just buckets of information very specific to each one of these nations. Then, each nation also includes 30, 40, 50 pages of player information. So, brand new career options. They have, so for example, Signar has a brand new career called the Stormsmith. And this is laid out exactly the same way as the core book careers. The way that this game works is you get to pick 2 careers and combine them together, which makes for a lot of really fun character creation and kind of this combinatorial idea that your actual character class is made up of 2 parts, and so you can build it any way you want. Stormsmith is one that's very unique to Signar, and so it's not in the core book, but it is here, and if you want to be from Signar, you've got that. But also, over here, you've got what are some career kind of modified careers. So everyone has arcanists, right? Everyone has rangers. Everyone has warcasters. But if you want to be a very specifically Signarin version of a ranger, then you can. And they've got rules here of how to modify the class, the career, so that it works. And there's requirements to take it, and then there's benefits you get from having it, and it's really neat. Then there are new abilities and new spells and new skills for every one of these 5 nations. And then there is an enormous section of gear. So Signar has a lot of lightning-based technology, electrical shocks and ball lightning and different ways of harnessing lightning and electrical energy. And so they've got a ton of weapons and gear and armor that use that technology. There's art for them, there's stats for them, there's everything. Then we get into the warjacks, and we get detailed statistics of every warjack you could ever want. If it shows up in the minis game, it's here. And there might be some extra ones too. Now, I should say, if it showed up in the minis game at the point where this game was published several years ago, then it's here. If it's brand new, then it won't be. But just page after page, so much information here about the different weapons that they can have. Do you want a Sentinel chain gun? Well, there's stats for that, and how you can add it to your Steamjack or your Warjack, up to and including some of the really heavy Warjacks and their weapons. Now, some of these, like look at that. That is a giant robot the size of a house that has 2 fully automatic machine guns on his arms. That's not the kind of thing you need if you're just going to be, you know, raiding dungeons and stealing treasure from ogres, right? But if you want to get to the point where you're fighting full-blown war, because this is the Iron Kingdom's war game, then yes, you've got all of the stats you could want. All of the very specific stuff that you loved in the minis game, maybe? Or just that you read this book and you're like, oh man, that's awesome. So, now we're going to take a look. I'm not going to show you all 5 nations, because all 5 nations have the same stuff. But I can't show you Signar without showing you Khador, which is my very favorite one of the human kingdoms. They're very kind of cold, snowy Russia, and so they get into all of this stuff. They talk about the Cossacks. They talk about the Umbrian princes. They talk about Zivana Aga, who is the old witch who's thousands of years old. How does she fit into their society? They talk about the Kayazi, which are the kind of criminal underworld of Khador. They go into all of these details, and then they offer, just like Signar does, some new careers. So there's Assault Commando, which, you know, I guess that could be exciting. But look, Doom Reavers. Doom Reavers are, they've got these swords here. It's called a Fell Blade. That is an ancient blade that was created by this horribly evil civilization that ruled this land for like 1,000 years, and then they were finally driven out. And they left behind some of their evil artifacts, including these haunted, possessed swords. And one thing that Khador does with their criminals and their kind of death row inmates is instead of just losing all of that manpower, they give them these evil possessed swords which drive them mad, and then they set them loose on the battlefield and just let them run wild and kill all the enemies. And you can be one in the game, and that's amazing to me. I love it. You can be, Khador's got incredible cavalry, so there we go, Khadoran cavalry. They've got these super cool, like, little mini robot exoskeleton suits that are steam powered and have magic engines in them. They're called Man-O-Wars, and you can be one of those as a character class too. There's so many great, awesome, wonderful things about this, and I love it. They've got rules, full rules for that Fellblade and what it does and how it works, what it does to you. Some other cool, stuff like the Ice Maul, which is, one of the big hammers that those Man-O-War suits can use. So much neat stuff. I'm going to skip over some of them just because I want to show you at the end the Protectorate. The Protectorate of Menoth is the one player kind of human kingdom that is most different from the others. And so they actually get more of their own special personalized careers than any other nation because they're very different from anybody else. They're you can probably guess by the style of the art there, they're kind of holy warriors and religious zealots. And so they've got all of these other great options. They even have the Reclaimer here. Let's see if we can show you that. The Reclaimer is a very strange character class because Reclaimers take a vow of silence. And so it actually says in here, this might not work for you. It's mostly intended as an NPC thing. But if you want to, you can absolutely play as one. And it could be a really interesting role-playing challenge to play a religious warrior who's taken a vow of silence. If you're into that, this lets you do that. So this big, fat, huge book includes so much information and so much specific information from the beginning, from even their original kind of D&D, SRD origins before they had their own role-playing game. They have always been known for and famous for their bounty of world information. Their Monsternomicon to this day is one of the best that's ever been produced because it doesn't just look at the statistics, but it goes into the history and the culture and who is this monster, where did this monster come from, what is this monster like, where are the places you might like to see this monster, where are places you're not going to want to run into the monster. And that's what this book is for the cultures. It has so much information, which is going to inspire new adventure ideas, new character concepts, and all of this great stuff that really grounds you in the world. And if you are into that kind of role-playing, where you get all of the information and you can really feel immersed in a brand new fantasy world, a book like this is exactly what you're looking for. So, really love the game. Can't say enough good things about this gargantuan supplement for it. And check it out. Anyway, I am Dan Wells. Thank you for watching very much. You are awesome.